So what's the theme of Fire Emblem Genealogy of the Holy War? Well, I guess we'll try to look back at the previous games and talk about their main themes. I guess the original game, FE1, I guess the main theme is humans can kind of be greedy and arrogant sometimes, and that can lead to like wars and stuff, and like people can die from that, and like unnecessary deaths. Try not to let someone else's greed cause unnecessary death, going off of the whole permadeath mechanic in that game, of course. And in FE2, I guess it's, find a way to strike balance and, generally do what you can to avoid, full-scale war like Zofia did. Of course, balance being, ruling with both power and compassion in relative equal measures. And in FE3, I guess the main theme of FE3, I guess, is, the fact that, sometimes deep-seated resentment, it exists within people's hearts and within people's consciousness. I guess you can, refer to it, somewhere, but ultimately they might not, end up having any consequences. But unfortunately for Hardin, one little dark sphere, one little, psychological, trick, so to speak, flipped the switch, and he ended up, acting upon his deep-seated resentment for Marth, and that ended up causing a big war. And obviously we also saw that with Elrian as well, of course, with him, going ham on Merrick. But of course, obviously there's also the fact that probably Marth shouldn't have placed the trust of the people of Altea in the hands of, the Emperor of Arcania, a separate area. But whatever. It's not the most intriguing theme ever, but it's a little bit more complex than the previous two games. But of course, in FE4, it's a little bit it's a slightly less linear pie to try to get the main theme out of a game like this. There's of course a lot of things. There's racism. There's banishment, so to speak. Obviously how the people of Jugdral, banished, the Loctarians underground, and that's cool. But also the fact that there's foreign powers out there that pretty much dragged Jugdral into the war. Of course, being Loptis, and obviously maybe it's meant to represent the fact that there is always foreign stuff out there, and maybe never let your guard down in terms of what could possibly attack you, so to speak, because there are a lot of crazy things out there that can technically attack you, whether they be spirits, some sort of psychological disembowelment or whatnot, or maybe a virus, as you would say. But yeah, could all be considered I guess main themes or main sticking points of FE4 in terms of story. But of course there's also the Loptarian Order, which I guess can represent the cult-like nature, of course, of religion and stuff, and people can sometimes do weird things or very questionable things in order to fulfill their that religion, so to speak, and to fulfill whatever goal ever existed with that particular that religion, or at least the interpretation of said religious practice. But regardless, though, I mean, I guess obviously burning children and having children, starving them, and forcing them to fight, basically programming them to sort of be a suitable person for the Empire, or whatever it is, and a suitable citizen, so to speak, someone who will, if push comes to shove, they have to, calculatedly and, assuredly, put the other person down, or, try to, drain the soul out of someone else. I guess you could say drain, all the unique life force out of a person, I guess you could call it. Of course, the game's kind of on the nose about the whole, religion is bad, type of thing, or religion is always, inherently a cult, or something, to that effect. But either way, though, of course, I wouldn't really say it's still a main theme. Of course, obviously the game, it says some wild things, especially, this early in video games history, and this at this particular point in history. But regardless of that, well, yeah, FE4, the story, it's kind of just a mismatch of bad things that happened during war, kind of, so to speak. But ultimately, it's hard to find a particular sticking point or any particular main theme or main takeaway, main overall overarching type of narrative that's being drawn out here. It's kind of just a bunch of things thrown into one, and it blends together into a shitstorm, and that's kind of FE4. But either way, though, well, either way, there's no really very clear sort of main theme of this game. I guess you could chalk up the main theme to don't hold a grudge against the human race, as Loptis clearly seemed to do that, and holding a grudge against the entire human race usually doesn't end well for you. That would be a little bit of a rough sort of an anticlimactic main theme of this game, but of course that wouldn't be an untrue, I guess, takeaway from this game. But I guess we'll move on to the music, since that definitely gets considerably more interesting, at least in terms of how it relates to the story of this game in particular. So FE4's music, yeah, it's pretty nice, but of course the games that came before, Fire Emblem, 1 and 2 on the Famicom, they're not bad, but they don't really have any particular edge to them, I guess you could say. But of course, Fire Emblem 3, the 16-bit console, of course, they used actual instrumentations on there as opposed to, the beeps, the doots, the boops, the borples, as you would say, on the NES. And yeah, obviously the composer was much more comfortable working with, some actual instruments, compressed as they may be. And yeah, the FE3's music was clearly much more interesting than the previous two games, and yeah, a fair bit more lively and melodic. But ultimately, though, yeah, we did in that game see the first truly great Fire Emblem music, I guess you could say, the first glimpse of it. And yeah, obviously leading into FE4, we finally fully realized that, I guess. But I guess it's just it's a lot more than that as well. The music in FE4, there's so many crazy sounds. Of course, the greater use of the bass lines and more static noises, but also just the fact that the music's is just so dynamic. I mean, there's nothing really else like it, even with the quote-unquote hardware limitations of the Super Famicom. But yeah, Fire Emblem music, it's been amazing, and it hasn't stopped ever since, pretty much. But either way, though, yeah, talking about more specific, songs and things in relation to this game specifically, well, the music, I guess you could say it has a little bit of a weird identity. Of course, video game music, being used to represent, generalistically, a point in the game, whether it be story or any particular, gameplay, influence. But ultimately, the music in this game, it sometimes, there's emotions, of course, that you attach to certain moments in the story and stuff like that. Or yeah, but of course, in this game, though, the emotions, that are involved with each of the songs can be a little bit odd sometimes. The biggest, I guess, example, or the easiest one, is Verdane Army. Of course, Verdane Army invading, Granville, Southwest Granville. Yeah, it's probably fairly traumatic for the people, involved in that little raid. But obviously, of course, as you know, Verdane Army, the song, it is ubiquitously groovy, and yeah, the snaps, the whole ding 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 or whatever in the song, it's pretty telling that yeah, there's a little bit of a disposition towards what's actually happening, and the funkiness of the song, and that ain't a bad thing. It's just this sort of this idea permeates throughout the soundtrack, something that's clearly supposed to be this type of emotion, but the song kind of somewhat indicates otherwise, and who knows, that may hint at some other motives or a different angle to the story that might not be immediately present through the dialogue. But those songs in this game, they typically, well, I guess it's kind of hard to attach a specific emotion to these particular songs. I mean, of course, you can call them like sad, or generally dour, or dramatic, but or even upbeat, or whatever. Ascending is a word you could also use, but ultimately, though, it's kind of particularly difficult to label a particular specific emotion to each of these songs, as again, they're pretty dynamic, and what exactly would you describe Celeste Palace theme as, for example, or what would you describe I don't know, Agustria Army, I guess, as it's kind of hard to tie fairly specific emotions to such pieces of music, and it's ultimately kind of a fruitless endeavor, and just let the dynamicness and the music itself play itself out, and you can draw your own emotional balances and conclusions from each song. Obviously, each song has its own little quirks and different ways of presenting itself, but ultimately the songs, they can be used to represent many different emotions, and the entire song is crafted fairly well. It's none of these songs feels like a dull part, or a part that feels ignored, so to speak. It is all of the aspects of the song, I guess, contribute to the main melody, and that is certainly something you don't really see songs doing at all anymore these days. Every single part contributing to the melody, and ultimately having its own sense of purpose, and its own sense of being. And of course, there's also the fact that this game loves using leitmotifs and stuff, calling back to other songs in the game, as well as a few songs from previous games. But yeah, that is pretty cool. But either way, though, this game set a pretty decent precedent for music and stuff, and obviously the games themselves obviously have much more to offer since this game, with all of its little gameplay tweaks, and of course mainly the fact that it's quite ambitious. I think that's the biggest thing. But either way, though, of course, this game came out at a time, it came out around other JRPGs, Chrono Trigger, whatever, Earthbound. And of course, this game released a year before Final Fantasy VII, and it also released a few months before the N64, where people were more concerned with 3D gaming. And obviously, people weren't really, looking for stories in video games still at this time. And, the medium storytelling in video games, it hadn't, truly expanded, it hadn't bloated, and stayed kind of, firm, low in the ground, kind of like a sapling. But eventually, people will realize the storytelling in video games can be very, 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 unique, and, top-notch in its own relative respect. But either way, though, of course, this game, we'll see what happens from here on out. But either way, we're heading to the next game, Thracia 776, so cool.